Great to be with you today. How are you? Monday, back at it. Unless you're somebody who works on the weekend, in which case that annoys you when people talk like, who had the weekend off? I was working, you lazy bum. I get it. But for those of you back at it for your first day of the work week, I'm grateful that you chose WMAL to perhaps head home or head in, whatever it is you're doing. Vince is out today. My name's Chris Stigall, filling in. Vince will be back tomorrow, as I understand it. The telephone number remains the same, and always welcome you into the conversation. 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. As for me, I host a radio show down the street there in Philadelphia. I do mornings. And if you are interested in that kind of stuff, if you're looking for something, if Larry O'Connor, for instance, just completely tedious and boring, you can always check out my show online or listen to the podcast at chrisstigall.com. I kid because I love him. No, but in all sincerity, I do a daily podcast in addition to the show. So if you ever want to hear more of what we're doing over there, you can check it out at chrisstigall.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's Stigall. Got a question for you. This story interested me, and I don't know where you'll come down on it ultimately. It's interesting, the reaction I've seen on social media from some people. At the New York Post, are you a Lowe's or a Home Depot snob, first of all? If you've got to go to one of the big box stores, if it's not your local, hardware store or your local lumber yard, which one do you pick? Those are the two bigs, right? Lowe's, Home Depot. Almost every community that has one has the other. Are you have a bias toward one or the other for one reason or another? And I will tell you that in my time shopping there, just as a guy who goes for various home improvement needs or, go to the greenhouse and pick out a plant to plant in the yard or something, I have, over the years, I've preferred one to the other. But they've both changed. Like there was a period of time where I remember being completely all in on Home Depot. And then there was a time where I said, I kind of like my Lowe's experience better and shied away from Home Depot. I've kind of begun to lean back into Home Depot again. Supplies are different. You can also tell, over time, employees in these stores, there's a stretch of time, at least in my experience, where employees are super, super, super almost overly helpful. And then there are times where you're desperate to get somebody, you got to tackle an employee to help you. That's always been sort of an interesting thing. And both of these stores, both of these chains, in the time that I've been shopping there, have gone through phases where they've been both overly helpful and then you can't find anybody to help you at all. Both chains have done that. So I'm kind of a jump ball on the two, but I've seen some reaction to this New York Post story about a Lowe's worker in Georgia who just lost her job. Lowe's fired her, and it's why that's got people so mad. And I've seen some people commenting on social media that I'll never shop at a Lowe's again because of this. And I was kind of curious if that would be your reaction or not at 888-630-WMAL. Maybe you've already seen it. If you have, give me a ring and jump on in here, 888-630-WMAL. A Georgia Lowe's employee attempted to stop shoplifters making off with $2,100 worth of merchandise. It left her not only with a black eye, but unemployed. Woman's name is Donna Hansborough. She's 68 years old. She saw three people loading up a shopping cart at a store in Georgia, Rincon, Georgia. It's about 30 minutes north of Savannah, Georgia. So she saw this going on, and then she saw them leave without stopping to pay. The veteran employee then grabbed onto the cart, allegedly being pushed by one of the suspects, who slugged her in the face 3 times. One of these suspects, who was with her uncle, Joseph Berry, and another man, police identified as, there was a fourth, I guess, made off with the goods. So this woman, she's 68 again, mind you. She has worked for Lowe's for 13 years. 13 years. She tries to stop these people for stealing $2,100 worth of goods, and they fired her. Lowe's fired her. Why did they fire her? For violating company policy by interfering with crooks. Hansborough telling the local press, they say that if you see somebody stealing something out the door, not to pursue, not to go out. I just lost it. I grabbed the cart. I don't actually remember going out, but I did. And I grabbed the cart that had the stolen items in it. She said she became overwhelmed by instinct. Never thought her employer would actually let her go. I didn't expect to get terminated, maybe reprimanded or suspended. I just got tired of seeing things go out the door. I lost it. I basically lost all the training. Everything they tell you to do, I just lost it. The 68-year-old Hansborough is currently looking for a new job. I can't sit home. I'm not that type of person, she told the local press. So she confesses that Lowe's has basically trained her. She's worked for them for 13 years, and she confesses, yep, that's what they tell me, that I'm not to try to stop them. I'm not to try to get involved. I just let it go. And for some reason, I just lost it. She said, I got so tired of watching this. Clearly what she's communicating is, I've seen this happen a lot. I've been watching these people shoplifting with regularity, and I just lost it. I couldn't do it anymore, and so I got involved. For this, she got fired. And I wonder if you agree. Ultimately, do you side with Lowe's here? Now, listen, as someone who's mindful that everything is litigious these days, everybody's thinking about lawyers and fast cash and monies and lawsuits, I'm well aware that Lowe's, as a corporation, has to be mindful of a couple of things. Number one, suggesting that they would have a policy or that they would stand by encouraging their employees to get involved in criminal activity that could hurt them. I get it. I get that Lowe's is basically trying to tell their employees, listen, there's nothing in our store that is worth hurting yourself, getting yourself hurt, or maybe even killed for goods in the store. And we don't want to be responsible in any way for making you feel like you got to inject yourself in the middle of a crime. Don't do it. And to send that message, they fired a 68-year-old woman who's worked for them for 13 years, who just said, I couldn't take the theft anymore, and I got involved. Do you think this is an overreaction by Lowe's? Is this unfair? Or do you say, look, I don't have to tell you people in D.C. about theft. I don't have to tell you people in suburban D.C. about theft. I know that. I know this part of the country better than anybody knows about rampant theft and people just helping themselves to whatever and walking out the door. But the question is, are you irresponsible as an employee of a store when you decide, I've had it. I cannot just stand idly by and let these people steal. I lost my head and I tried to stop them. Well, for this, she lost her job. She's not a bad person, clearly. I mean, she's been a 13-year employee. She's 68, and she just said, I lost myself and I got involved. Should she have been fired by Lowe's? And what, if anything, should be a company's expectation of employees? I mean, if you don't like that Lowe's fired her, put yourself in the position of being a big employer like Lowe's for a minute. And you do have this rampant problem of shoplifting. Put yourself in, it's tough. We don't like to do this, but put yourself in the position of Lowe's for a minute. You can't have employees acting as security guards, right? You can't. I don't know. Maybe you could argue that Lowe's should hire security guards, I guess. Maybe some of them already do have them, depending on where you are. 888-630-WMAL is the number. Chris Stigall in for Vince Coglianese today. I'm just really curious how we solve this, because I know there are a lot of us who have worked. I've worked retail before. Maybe you have too. Maybe you do now. You have to feel a sense of, this is wrong. This is my place of business. These people are stealing from it. I feel a loyalty to the place I collect the check. I don't want to see that happen. I feel like I want to stop that, but these places are like, don't do that. You hurt yourself, and then we're liable if you end up hurting yourself in the middle of stopping a crime. I'm actually kind of sympathetic to Loews here a little bit, but naturally I'm sympathetic to a 68-year-old woman who got a black eye trying to stop thieves. 888-630 WMAL. Let's go to Danny in D.C., as a matter of fact, on this. I'd love to know. Nope, sorry, wrong one. Sorry, Danny. Hang on, I will come to you. Don't go anywhere. Let's go to Fredericksburg and talk to Ward. Ward, you're up first. What do you say about this? Welcome in.
Hey, thank you for having me. I think that they made a mistake, and they could have pulled her aside and said, hey, this is our policy, and it's for your own good because we don't want you to get hurt. But to fire a 68-year-old woman is ridiculous that's trying to help the company. So my prayer would be that one of her competitors, like Home Depot, or maybe a smaller business like True Value, or one of the Family Tractor, one of those stores would hire her and advertise that they hire her, and they would pull in a lot of customers like me. I'd go there in a heartbeat.
Yeah, you could make a lot of news if you did, right, Ward? You think about a great PR move, hiring this lady in the community and making a big bunch of news about it.
Yeah, I think it'd be great, and I think it should emphasize it's for the reason that she was trying to do something good. Not, they could tell her, hey, your safety is important to us. Please don't do that again. But to fire her, I think is, wrong.
May I ask just generally what you do for a living, Ward? What's your job?
Well, I'm a retired Marine, and I work for the Marine Corps now as a civilian. And
could you put yourself, being a Marine, this is a particularly sensitive question, I bet, for you, because there's nobody, most of us don't associate anybody tougher than Marines. Let's just imagine you're working a retail job and you see somebody stealing from your store. The store says, hey, look, man, Ward, you're just an employee. Don't get yourself involved. Don't want you getting hurt. I would bet your instinct, like most people, if you're decent, is that's not right. I can't just stand here and watch my employer get robbed. If there's a gun, obviously, and you're not armed, it's different. But, I can imagine a decent person's instinct is to get involved, right?
Yeah, I'd like to think that my instinct would take over and I would do what I considered the right thing. And, you never know till you're actually in the situation. But I think probably just the way I was raised, and then with my time in the Marine Corps, I would say, no, this isn't going to happen, and I would step in.
Ward, thanks. Glad you called, and thanks for your service. Let's here in Dumfries, it's John. John, you actually worked at a Lowe's once upon a time. Is that right? Welcome in. I'm Chris, in for Vince today. Hi.
No, actually, I wasn't. I was shopping there with my wife, and I saw this guy trying to walk out with two Husqvarna chainsaws.
Wow.
So I confronted him. He pulled a knife on me, and I grabbed a fistful of hair, dragged his ass back inside, and the manager started yelling at me. And I basically told him to shut the heck up. Yeah. Told him to shut up, give me a room, and call the police. And a few minutes later, these loss prevention guys came out of the woodwork, to offer some assistance after we had essentially gotten the guy in the room. Police came, took a report, and we actually went to court. He got like 12 months. He was a heroin addict, and I know why Lowe's doesn't want you doing that, because it is a liability. But I don't think they were right to fire her, like your previous caller said. They probably should have suspended her, given her a little slap on the wrist, and given her an award.
John, thank you. Glad you called. The telephone number is 888-630 WMAL. What do you think about this? What do we do? This is increasingly a problem. And if you're an employee, particularly if you're an employee in retail, I would love to hear how you've dealt with this, if you've dealt with this before, or if you've been trained, hey, just let them steal. Watch it walk out the door. That feels like it would be very demoralizing as an employee, too, I would think. 888-630-9625. Let's check some traffic, some weather. I want to take your calls on the other side of this thing. Let's go to Michael in West Virginia. I'm Chris Stigall in for Vince Coglianese today. Talking about this 68-year-old woman in Georgia at a Lowe's. She was fired for intervening, trying to stop some people from stealing from a store she's worked in for 13 years. She got a black eye out of it. Lowe's fired the employee for getting involved. Michael, what do you say about it? Welcome in.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having my call. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah, I think that Lowe's and the Home Depots and some of these other big box stores need to go to a process similar of Costco and Sam's, where you're membership only to shop. So when you come in the front door, you'll be asked for your membership credentials before you can continue.
Interesting. Michael, thank you. Great idea. Aaron's in Bowie next. Aaron, thanks for waiting. Welcome in. What do you say?
Hey, let me give you from a law enforcement officer's perspective. First of all, that's the type of heartbreaking story, and I absolutely do not believe that she should be fired. I agree with the previous caller that says she ought to be given an award. I really think that it's not necessarily Lowe's, Home Depot, or any other outlet. If you're familiar with the outlets near the National Harbor, none of them will prosecute for shoplifting. So, unfortunately, out in Western Maryland, the only box stores are Lowe's, and they're phenomenal. And if there was a crime out there, they would pursue it. So it really is a red area versus blue area as to how they approach it.
Interesting. All right. So there's less theft in places where prosecution is heavier, harder. Aaron, thank you for that. In Virginia, Dennis is next. Dennis, what do you say about it? Welcome in on the Vince Coglianese Show. I'm Chris in for Vince today.
Well, I just wanted to remind everybody that in January of this year in North Carolina, an 83-year-old Home Depot worker was, pushed by a shoplifter, and he died. And they charged this shoplifter with murder. And, so this is just this year. So there's a lot of violence going on with these shoplifters. And
yes.
Can I say one more thing? It's kind of like
Please.
off topic, but I served in the Marines in Vietnam, and regarding the soccer team, our soccer team, I can't believe it, but I actually rooted for Vietnam to win. But the ancestors that shot me on Hill 689, because the disrespect and the smugness of the ingrate soccer team, they don't represent me. They don't represent America. They represent themselves. And it just burned me when I saw how they reacted to this on the world stage to our the national anthem.
Yeah, that's the very classy Megan Rapinoe, however you say her name. Good riddance to her. Thank you, my friend, and thanks for your service. As we take a quick break for news, I'm Chris Stigall in for Vince on WMAL. RFK Jr. was on with Maria Bartiromo talking about censorship, not just social media censorship, which was part and parcel of the testimony last week. It was social media actively censoring a political candidate, but also we know our government working in concert with media and social media to keep certain stories like the Hunter Biden laptop from public view. Here's a little of what RFK Jr. told Maria Bartiromo about censorship generally.
In history, they're never the good guys. And it's inevitable that if you do start censoring speech, because government abuses every power that it's given, and if government suddenly has the capacity to censor its critics, it has a license for any atrocity.
So you've thought about this a lot, and you said, in the hearing that this is the beginning of totalitarianism. I want to know what you can do about it. You've thought about this. So, they've censored, COVID information, Russia collusion information. The Trump administration dealt with it every day. The media and the way government works with Twitter to try to suppress truth and amplify lies. What is your plan to change it?
The alarming thing that's come out in Judge Doty's decision, this is a federal district judge, just issued a 155-page decision forbidding the White House from having any contact with social media companies because it abused those contacts so badly over the past 3 years. What we now know is that the White House had deployed an army of federal agencies, including the CIA, the FBI, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, the IRS, and many others, to threaten Facebook, Google, and Twitter with withdrawing their Section 230 immunity, which is an existential threat. Those companies cannot exist without that immunity. And they were told that if they did not censor the president's opponents, critics of these policies, that they would lose that immunity.
Emma Jo Morris knows this story well. She testified before Congress just last week, in fact, in this same hearing with RFK Jr. that was so widely publicized. She's the Breitbart News politics editor now, former editor at the New York Post who broke the Hunter Biden laptop story, and she testified before Congress talking about the lead-up to the 2020 presidential election and what big tech and social media companies did back then to censor the report on this laptop story. She joins us now. Ms. Morris, thank you so much for your time. And by the way, your testimony last week, I know it's never easy to put yourself on a national stage like that because I can't even imagine the hell that must rain down, but welcome in. I'm grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And you'd be surprised, actually. I've received thousands of comments, emails, DMs, whatever, and I've had so much positive reaction to it. You would never think. Actually, like maybe just a handful of negative comments, but really everyone has been just lovely.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. Are you surprised by some? Obviously, you don't have to divulge who. I'm not asking, but have you heard from corners praise that you weren't expecting?
So to be honest, well, I don't, most of the comments are just people who don't have public profiles. They're just the American people reaching out to say thank you and to congratulate me and to express their gratitude, I guess, for the message that I have. I haven't seen really any higher profile people commenting on it.
Media colleagues, I guess, is more specifically what I meant, because I've heard from time to time media colleagues will say quietly to one another, hey, thanks. I could never say what you just said. Any of that at all? No?
No, they would never.
I guess I was hopeful. I was being hopeful.
Yeah, maybe one day.
Yeah. The RFK Jr. testimony seemed to get the most attention of the day, and it like attacking him savagely. It was so bizarre the way Democrats attacked one of their own. He was all but begging them, hey, we're on the same page. We care about the same issues, don't we? I'm just talking about the issues you and I care about, and they're censoring me. Please help. He seemed almost like he was pleading with them, and they were just slitting his throat proverbially. Emma Jo, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I think RFK, and I've seen him a few times now over the last few days because, like you said, we testified together, and then we were on Sunday Morning Futures together on Fox, so I saw him then too, and I think he still doesn't fully understand the dynamic that at least I see to be true, which is that we don't really have a Republicans versus Democrats dynamic. We have an establishment versus anti-establishment dynamic, the establishment versus populist dynamic. And RFK is obviously anti-establishment. He's running against Joe Biden, who is the favored choice. And he's talking about issues that the establishment does not want to talk about for whatever reason. So he can call himself a Democrat all he wants and, recall romantically the 60s where Democrats, were the party that he thinks he represents. But that's not how it is anymore. And the sooner he learns that, I think the better off he'll be and the better footing he'll have, because when you can see when you can see the environment clearly, that's when you can operate obviously optimally. And I think that he's still struggling with that. He's still struggling with the fact that the left-right dichotomy no longer exists.
You were at the epicenter of the Hunter Biden story prior to 2020, and I've never spoken with you before about it. We've talked a little about it with Miranda Devine, for instance, but never you, and you were really kind of the driving force behind it. Were you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, what was your reaction in real time as you had what I assume you thought was a massive story on your hands and was getting no traction, in fact, actively being silenced from people. And now we see these polls that suggest if, maybe hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of Americans had known your story and read it and been privy to it, they would have changed their vote in 2020. What was your reaction to that in real time?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously surreal. I remember that morning, obviously. It's one of those things that I think I'll probably never forget, where, we posted this story and I didn't know what to expect of it. I knew, obviously, that the establishment media was not just going to embrace it and publicize it so easily. I knew that I would face a lot of criticism and a lot of skepticism, and that was why, if you read the original story, we wrote exactly where we got the material for the reporting. We were totally transparent about that because we didn't want there to be some sort of controversy around concealing the fact that we did get the hard drive originally from Bannon and from Rudy. So we were totally upfront about where we got everything, why we believed that this was worth publishing, why we, assessed that it was real and true. But I could have never imagined the the response that we really got, which is exactly right. We were basically deleted from the internet. But actually, it wasn't exactly that. That was it at first. But then people started talking about the fact that the New York Post had this story that you couldn't post on Twitter, and there was controversy surrounding that. But so what that ended up doing was it kind of poisoned the well around the story, right? And now you have, even still to this day, even after the New York Times and the Washington Post have all come out and confirmed the story themselves, Politico, books have been written and published about this story and the same materials. You still have people in this country who, and I think a significant percentage of them, who reflexively, when they hear Hunter Biden laptop, they just automatically think, oh, that's fake.
Yes.
And they don't even really know why, but it's just something that they believe. And that is really what the censorship did. It wasn't that it erased it from public consciousness or that it deleted it from public conversation. It was in public conversation, but it just casted an aspersion on the reporting that it doesn't deserve.
I want to focus with you on something I know is obvious to you, but I can't stop talking about it because I think it's so important. And this lunatic Plaskett, congresswoman or representative from the Virgin Islands, I mean, she's a straight up lunatic, but she's the ranking member on this committee. You testified before. She was on with Jen Psaki over the weekend. Give me number 85, because these Democrats, they keep saying similar versions of the same thing, whether they're news anchors at MSNBC and CNN or Democrat members of Congress. They all say the same thing. And Obama just said it at a symposium. They're duty bound as elected officials to silence people because of untruth or some such. Listen.
They want to talk about censorship, that anytime you point out untruths, you're censoring, you're stopping people from speaking. It's not that we're not stopping people from speaking. People can speak, but we're also going to give the American people the truth so that they can have science and facts and history against wild, outlandish claims that the Republicans are trying to get. That's not only going to keep them from going to the polls or suppressing vote or telling untruths, but is also really very detrimental to the American people.
You see, it's detrimental. Rachel Maddow, Emma Jo Morris, who's Breitbart News politics editor, these news anchors, when Trump speaks, for instance, here's what she said after he was going to speak about his first indictment.
Is making remarks tonight from his home in Florida. As far as we can tell, and what we were prepared for here is that this is basically a campaign speech in which he is repeating his same lies and allegations against his perceived enemies. It is just getting started. So far, he's just giving his normal list of grievances. We don't consider that necessarily newsworthy, and there's a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things. So our deal with you is that we will monitor these remarks. If he does say anything newsworthy, we will turn them around and report on that right away. But for now, just know that it's happening and we're not taking it.
So this theme, and Jake Tapper has said it, we've got a montage of it. I'm not going to bore you with it, Emma Jo, but the point is that they have cleverly gaslit everything that opposes them as a lie we can't allow people to hear. Isn't that clever?
What's an untruth? What does that mean?
They just make stuff. It's amazing what they've done. It's jujitsu like I've never seen.
I don't even know that is the most Orwellian.
Thank you.
What does that mean?
I know.
Untruth?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it a lie or is it true? What's an untruth? Is the laptop from hell an untruth that keeps people from the polls? Like, you bet it does keep people from the polls, because it's an untruth, double negative, that exposes vast corruption by the person who is running for president at the time. Untruth. What a joke. I went real viral because I bursted out laughing at one point when I was talking about the untruths of the intelligence community and how preposterous and beyond parody they are. And I was asked about it after, and I said, I just can't go along with this thing that we do in New York and DC where we pretend that these people are serious and not clowns, because they are clowns and they're funny. And you can't, these people need to be mocked mercilessly because they are clowns. This is ridiculous. What is an untruth? And Jen Psaki, of course, the esteemed journalist and reporter and media woman and girl boss, doesn't push back on this person to say, what do you mean by that? Can you define that?
Give her Jake Tapper while we're rolling. I think Emma Jo will like this. This is another one that we like to play quite a bit here.
We do have now some of the sound. As I told you, we're not, and the audience, we're not carrying his remarks live because, frankly, he says a lot of things that are not true and sometimes potentially dangerous.
I mean, Emma Jo, they just...
Yeah, and that's what's dangerous. Here, listen. RFK was caught by the New York Post saying something dumb, in my opinion, that COVID was genetically engineered or whatever to not impact Chinese people and Ashkenazi Jews, okay? Mm-hmm. That was called dangerous by the Democrats, I guess. They compared him to Hitler, I think. Debbie Wasserman Schultz did, or one of them compared him to Hitler.
Yes.
And that was supposed to be really dangerous, and now he's dangerous. There was something funny about that because I'm an Ashkenaz Jew, and I was sitting there right next to him, and I think it's hard to make the case that words are dangerous in that context where you have that scene exactly what he said is supposed to be attacking me, I suppose. And I'm just sitting there next to him chilling. I mean, he seemed like a fine guy. I don't know. And it's just all such, I can't say the word that I want to say.
Oh, I know.
It's a family show.
I know exactly. It's you're right. It's Orwellian for sure.
And you're watching it, and you're like, I'm almost slack-jawed, and I'm just like, dangerous? Like, what's dangerous? What are they talking about? And I actually got a little bit frustrated and a little bit irate, I will admit, during the hearing, and it was actually by questioning by a Republican. And it just so happened that it all just kind of bubbled up for me while she was talking. But I, wasn't directing it necessarily at her. But we were each asked on the panel, by her, if we think that there's any circumstance where I guess law enforcement should intervene in speech or something. I don't know. I don't even remember exactly what the question was, but they were basically asking if the First Amendment is what it is, and if we agree with it. And I just kind of was like, we're talking about speech. What are we what is this conversation?
Yes.
And I'm an immigrant to this country. I come from Canada, which obviously is culturally similar to the US in certain ways, but actually, if you've spent any time in Canada, it's really not that similar. And one thing about Canada that's different from the US and why I wanted to move here is because there is not freedom of speech in Canada. You have these extrajudicial tribunals that have the right to harass citizens and fine citizens, and sometimes for a lot of money. There are a couple businesses that were put out of business for offending trans people, and they have the right to just make your life hell. And over speech, because they do describe speech as a potential danger and a potential crime. And to me, it is just surreal, having watched this country from the outside my whole life and then only moving here at 23 and really being so excited and making my mission to go to live in America. That is where you want to go. And that is the best place on earth. Why? what's different between America and Canada, that the people are just so authentic, and that they say exactly how they feel, and they say exactly what they think, and that's part of the culture. You know what I mean? It's the law, and the law permeates through the culture, where it's just a different kind of vibe. And it's all around that. And so, I'm being asked this with a straight face, and I cannot believe my ears. And I can't even believe where I'm sitting and why I'm sitting there. I'm there to make the case for free speech, as if that's something that even needs to be defended. And in that answer, when I was asked that, I said, I cannot believe we're having this conversation. This is not taboo.
Yes.
We're talking about something that is so fundamental. This is crazy.
Well, and
it's just crazy.
Yeah, and so when you hear news anchors on a network cable show saying we're not going to allow you to hear the following things because
untruths are dangerous or something.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it has to. It takes someone from somewhere else sometimes, I think, to come in and remind us how dangerous that kind of speech is, frankly, and what an affront it is to our.
Yeah, that's dangerous speech.
That's right.
Making the case that freedom of speech is outdated.
Yes, amen. Listen, Emma Jo, I hope we can stay in touch. I am so grateful for your candor and your open testimony and your work as a journalist. Breitbart News politics editor, Emma Jo Morris. You can follow her at Emma Jo NYC on Twitter. Thank you. Please come back.
Thank you so much. I would love to. Thank you. Anytime.